Thanks to this week's sponsor, Rec Watches. Rec Watches specialises in unique timepieces made from reclaimed materials that carry historic, legendary or heroic stories for enthusiasts who want to carry a piece of legendary history with them. They have some really interesting watches, and I'm excited to share their limited edition timepiece, the Habu. The Habu incorporates titanium from the legendary SR-71 Blackbird No. 617956 B variant, the most flown SR-71 with 1,454 missions and 3,967 flight hours. While stationed in Okinawa, SR-71s were nicknamed Habu after the region's venomous pit viper. The lower dial of the Habu timepiece integrates authentic SR-71 titanium, sourced from the aircraft's inner engine nacelle exhaust ejectors, also known as turkey feathers. By incorporating this rare titanium, the Habu watch creates a tangible link to aviation history, celebrating the daring innovation behind this legendary aircraft. Each watch is unique and is a living testament to history, sure to spark conversations. Designed in Denmark and crafted in Switzerland, every Rec timepiece is naturally limited by the availability of its historic components. The Habu series is available exclusively at recwatches.com/timepieces/Habu. Head over to their website linked on screen and in the video description below to check them out. Thanks again to Rec Watches for sponsoring this video. After 2 days of climbing in the thin air, the 4 American operators reached their vantage point, staring into the Milawa Valley in eastern Afghanistan. Scattered across the rocky floor and cut into the mountain walls is a web of trenches, bunkers and fortified caves. Osama bin Laden dreams of making his final stand in the Tora Bora mountains. His Al-Qaeda fighters have created a fortress fit for the purpose, but for the men of CIA Team Jawbreaker, it's open season. Their Afghan guides defend the approaches to the peak, as Team Sergeant Joe O'Keefe, an Air Force combat controller, prepares the team's deadliest weapon, a SOFLAM laser designator. He eases the crosshairs over a bunker a couple of thousand meters away and paints it. Just minutes later, the mountain air is split by a sound like ripping linen. A 2,000-pound paveway lands right on the mark. The pair of US Navy F-14 Tomcats unleash more laser-guided bombs at O'Keefe's command. A fully loaded B-1B Lancer checks in next, and soon dozens of aircraft are operating over Tora Bora, all under the command of one man and his laser designator. Over the next 56 hours, the team will call in a staggering 380 tons of airdropped munitions, pulverizing fighting positions, smashing through caves, and killing untold scores of Al-Qaeda militants. At their headquarters, Jawbreaker's commander and New York native, Gary Bernstein, listens to the avalanche of airstrikes with grim satisfaction. One word kept pounding in my head: revenge. Jawbreaker's strikes have kicked off what is hoped to be the final stage of Operation Enduring Freedom. The United States intervention in Afghanistan started less than a month after the September 11th attacks, on the 7th of October 2001. Within weeks, a handful of US and Allied special forces, working with anti-Taliban militias, toppled the Taliban government and seized Kabul. But the world's most wanted man, Osama bin Laden, is still on the run. US intelligence assesses that surviving Taliban and Al-Qaeda leaders are fleeing to Tora Bora, next to the Pakistani border, long a training ground and safe haven for bin Laden's group. He has planned this battle for years, and has chosen his ground carefully. The task of hunting them down falls first to Team Jawbreaker, made up of field personnel drawn from the Counter-Terrorism Center and the secretive Special Activities Division. It's led by hard-charging CIA field officer Gary Bernstein. He delegates the Tora Bora operation to part of the force designated Jawbreaker Juliet, under the command of a Texan and former Marine known only as George. US Central Command's entire strategy centers on having as few troops in Afghanistan as possible, so the locals are to take the lead. Jawbreaker Juliet arrives in Jalalabad to link up with a friendly militia leader called Hazrat Ali. Ali is an experienced warrior, having successfully resisted the Taliban for the last 5 years. Also brought aboard is Haji Zaman, freshly arrived from his exile in Paris. He claims to be able to raise 1,000 men. The two Afghans are from different tribes and both view each other with deep suspicion. Both seek political influence in a post-Taliban Afghanistan, a rivalry that at times seems more important than finding bin Laden. Their uneasy coalition forms the Eastern Alliance, which Jawbreaker will need to hold together. On the 4th of December, as O'Keefe and his team keeps up the aerial barrage, Hazrat Ali attacks without coordinating with the Americans or the rest of the Eastern Alliance militias. Al-Qaeda fighters man mountaintop observation posts of their own, and Ali's forces, exposed at the foot of the mountains, are driven back by devastating fire from pre-sighted mortars and T-62 tanks. To provide more direct support, Ali is assigned ODA 572, a team of 12 US Army Green Berets. On the 7th of December, half of the team relieves the 4-man Jawbreaker team, establishing observation post Cobra Alpha north of the Milawa Valley. The other half infiltrates into the mountains to the west, creating a second observation post, codenamed Cobra Bravo, staring into the depth of Al-Qaeda's defences. While intelligence is confident that Al-Qaeda's leadership and potentially bin Laden are holed up in the valley, little else is certain. The Taliban are in disarray, but still battle-hardened. Al-Qaeda at this time is the world's most formidable terrorist group, formed by devoted jihadists from across the Islamic world. No one knows how many defend the crags and caves of Tora Bora, with estimates ranging from 300 to as many as 3,000. On the other hand, the Eastern Alliance fighters now surrounding the Tora Bora mountains have little motivation for the upcoming battle. According to one warlord, "My father told me, just go. We got there. I don't know what for. We had no food or anything." Unbelievably, many of the Haji Zaman's local fighters had been paid to help build Al-Qaeda's fortifications in the valley, and are still fond of the Saudi-born terrorist. In the desire to not put US troops on the ground, American leadership is attacking with deeply unmotivated, and in a lot of cases pro-Al-Qaeda fighters. While the Green Berets are getting into the fight, Zaman sends some of his men into Tora Bora and warns bin Laden of the coming attack, giving him 3 days to surrender or leave. Zaman believes this to be what is known as his Pashtun responsibility, a traditional code of conduct emphasizing honor unknown to his American visitors. Bernstein is concerned that bin Laden could slip across the mountains and over to Pakistan, and preventing this is not a task he trusts his newfound allies to do. He requests the deployment of 800 US Army Rangers to block the mountain passes, but this is declined. General Tommy Franks at CENTCOM is worried that by introducing large numbers of US troops, they will alienate their Afghan allies. However, Jawbreaker is not completely alone. A new day brings new allies, as Jawbreaker is reinforced by Task Force 11. Commanded by Major Thomas Greer, Task Force 11 is composed of around 40 operators, primarily from the US military's premier Special Operations Unit, Delta Force, augmented by 12 men from the United Kingdom's secretive Special Boat Service. Meeting at Hazrat Ali's headquarters, a schoolhouse in the foothills to the north, George urges him to attack. Waiting only gives bin Laden more time to escape. The self-styled general is hesitant. He demands more airstrikes and is concerned that if any of the newly arrived special forces are killed, the Americans will blame him. Major Greer assures him that Delta Force can take care of itself. To encourage Ali, George offers to use the largest bomb in the US inventory, the BLU-82 Daisy Cutter, to kickstart the attack, as well as a considerable cash incentive. As the Eastern Alliance prepares the next day's action, bin Laden sleeps soundly in a bunker on the valley floor. He made his name fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan in the 1980s, lionized by the Arab press after the relatively minor Battle of Jarji. The Sheikh, as he is called by his men, is confident he can recreate his earlier victory. But his rest turns to horror as, unable to move, he watches a deadly scorpion crawl into his dugout. He bolts awake from the nightmare. Deeply spiritual, he sees the dream as a premonition of danger and abandons the bunker. Hazrat Ali, George, and other fighters gather on a ridge on the early morning of the 9th of December, the atmosphere electric with anticipation. They watch with bated breath as an MC-130 combat Talon drones over the valley. The Daisy Cutter tumbles from the rear ramp. The enormous 15,000-pound bomb detonates, the shockwave cracking across the valley. 500 meters of ground is completely scorched, and shrapnel lands kilometers away. Insurgents in the neighboring caves hesitantly emerge from cover. The bunker complex has been vaporized. Watching in awe with them is Osama bin Laden. The Americans don't realize how close they were. Yet, several kilometers away, the Daisy Cutter is less impressive. Just a puff of dust and a rumble. Ali and his fighters are underwhelmed, expecting a massive fireball. To make matters worse, the Afghans' radios burst to life with panicked chatter. Several of the militiamen ignored the danger area and were too close to the bomb. Ali's confidence in American firepower is deeply shaken. George rustles up more air cover. 3 B-52 Stratofortresses arrive within the hour, plastering surrounding hills with over 100 Mark 82 bombs, but the general decides to hold off another day. The long-awaited attack commences on the 10th of December. Given just 5 minutes warning, Major Greer dispatches 3 men, A-Team leader Hopper, Admiral and Air Force combat controller, and Adam Khan, CIA translator and former Marine. Their orders are simple: go where the general goes, provide close air support, and kill as many Al-Qaeda as you can. Designated Jackal Team, they bounce up the mountain road in their battered Toyota, catching up with the mass of Eastern Alliance fighters. The Afghan column is halted, exposed on the track, waiting for a T-55 tank to clear a disabled self-propelled AA gun off the road. Khan doesn't like what he sees and eases their truck into cover. No sooner are the 3 men on foot, Al-Qaeda mortar fire rains down. The Americans dive for the dirt, while militia mill about. One group clumps together aimlessly until an 82mm round lands in their midst. After several tense minutes, the tank finally muscles the AA vehicle off the road, and the advance resumes. The mountain path narrows, so the force abandons their transport. General Ali is nowhere to be seen. With no clear leader, the Americans attempt to organize random groups of Afghans. A well-placed Al-Qaeda PKM machine gun pins down the militia, who clump together behind cover in large vulnerable groups, blindly firing their Kalashnikovs and RPGs in the general direction of the enemy. Their style of fighting is largely performative, impressive to the hundreds of Western journalists swarming the country, but hardly decisive. Meanwhile, Delta Force's mantra is speed, surprise, and violence of action. Admiral vectors a pair of Navy FA-18s onto the machine gun nest, obliterating it with a salvo of 1,000-pound JDAMs. Rocks crash down the mountainside as the Americans rush forward. Khan manages to corral a group of Afghans to come with him. Supported by more airstrikes, Jackal Team thrusts relentlessly into the heart of Tora Bora. But as the sun sinks lower in the sky, more and more of the Eastern Alliance fighters slip away, back down the mountain. Signal specialists back at the schoolhouse intercept a startling message. Bin Laden is surrounded. Listening in to Al-Qaeda radio traffic, they locate Bin Laden's position to within 10 meters, but he's on the move. George and Major Greer exchange a glance, not needing a word. The 33 Delta Force operators lock and load, clamber aboard their vehicles and set off like hounds released from the slips. Climbing up the dirt road, they meet a column of trucks and Toyotas coming the other way. The lead vehicle stops and General Ali warmly greets the Delta Force officer. Neither he nor even his guide have any idea what he's saying. As quickly as they appear, they're gone. The Pashto-speaking guides figure out what's happening. It's the holy month of Ramadan, and the Eastern Alliance has abandoned the battlefield to break the fast. In accordance with Islamic tradition, Muslims must fast through the day, and then ceremonially break the fast and eat at home with their families. For the Afghan militiamen, war and the pursuit of the world's most wanted terrorists does not interrupt this, another failing of cultural understanding by the American commanders. Jackal Team is now alone, trapped behind enemy lines. Green tracer fire suddenly snaps around them. Unsure if it's nervous allies or flanking Al-Qaeda fighters, the 3 operators take cover in a brace of trees. All but 5 of the Eastern Alliance fighters have vanished. The tribal militants desperately blaze away at the shadows, until Adam Khan angrily orders a ceasefire, berating them for revealing their position. Hopper settles their nerves by showing the 5 militants his night vision goggles. Admiral talks an AC-130 Spooky onto the machine gun behind them, but a low base of cloud obscures the target. With no air support, Hopper makes the call. They signal the code word Warpath, alerting the task force that they are surrounded and attempting to break out. With that, they creep along the rock face and into the darkness. Further down the mountain, tracer fire cracks around Task Force 11. Taking cover, they realise that the wave of gunfire isn't aimed at them. Al-Qaeda fighters on the ridgelines and hills are firing at something else, What is anyone's guess, but it means they're oblivious to the Delta team right beneath them. The Warpath call forces Greer to a decision point. He had planned to link up with the Eastern Alliance that supposedly had bin Laden surrounded, but there's no sign of such a force. He can go for bin Laden's suspected position 2,500 meters away, or he can search for his men, missing in a mountain range, crawling with enemies and equally dangerous allies. The Major concludes, "We'll have another shot at bin Laden. We need to concentrate on recovering our boys first." They stealthily weave through the chaos towards Jackal Team's last known location, ignoring the crump of mortars and the constant chatter of gunfire all around. Greer's force picks up Jackal's radio transmissions and locates them. Hopper, Admiral and Khan are in good shape, having bribed and negotiated their way past Eastern Alliance stragglers. Only 2 of the Afghans are left with them. With Task Force 11 back together, they return back down the mountain to the schoolhouse, but it's a night Major Thomas Greer will second guess for the rest of his life. After ceding all of their day's gains back to Al-Qaeda at night, the Eastern Alliance is back in action on the 11th of December. Both General Ali and Haji Zaman have their sights set on Hill 2685. The Warlords hold competing press conferences at the foot of the mountains for the assembled international media, before they lead their forces in a race for the summit. Forming a steady cab rank of air support, Hornets and Tomcats from carriers in the Gulf of Oman, and B-1 and B-52 strategic bombers flying from Diego Garcia constantly check in. They dispense their precision-guided bombs on anything designated by the Green Berets, then check out. Al-Qaeda fighters impotently fire RPGs skyward, trying to hit the aircraft circling thousands of feet out of range. Zaman's fighters reach the summit of Hill 2685 first, and clear the trenches of surviving Al-Qaeda fighters with surprising ruthlessness. A dejected Ali holds the lower ridges around the peak, yet the loss of the hill and the unrelenting airstrikes shakes bin Laden's confidence. For the lightly equipped Al-Qaeda fighters, conditions are dire. With a steady snowfall, the temperature sits at -10 degrees Celsius. Almost all of their water supply has frozen. Lighting fires will only invite American bombs. Despite media depictions of vast underground complexes, the fortifications are unable to withstand the bombardment, and casualties are mounting. Injured men are perishing overnight of otherwise survivable wounds. Al-Qaeda only has 1 doctor, and are so short of supplies that he is forced to perform surgery with scissors. Coalition forces listen in as bin Laden broadcasts a somber message. "I am sorry for getting you involved in this battle. If you can no longer resist, then you may surrender with my blessing." The crisis is weighing heavily on the Sheikh himself. With airstrikes reverberating across the mountains, he sits down to write his last will and testament. He thanks his 4 wives for their support, and apologizes to his sons for his absence. He begs them not to follow his path of jihad, and to stay away from Al-Qaeda. Determined not to repeat the first nice debacle, Major Greer creates a force to seize and hold key vantage points. The first such mission support site is designated MSS Grinch, led by a man known only as Sergeant Major Jim. Consisting of 25 Delta and 4 SBS operators, an assault team and snipers, their mission is to push deeper into the mountains, taking over forward air control duty from the Green Berets. As Grinch joins Saman's men on Hill 2685, the Army Special Forces score one last victory. They spot the troublesome Al-Qaeda mortars on their thermal sights. They calculate their position and vector in an orbiting AC-130. They watch with satisfaction as the aerial barrage ignites secondary explosions from the mortar pits. Unbeknownst to the Americans, Zaman and Al-Qaeda are negotiating. They aren't aware that culturally for the Afghan warriors, negotiating a conditional surrender, allowing the enemy to lay down their weapons and walk away, is traditionally how battles end. On the morning of the 12th of December, Adam Khan, with MSS Grinch, overhears the news of the ceasefire on the Afghan radios, noting that they agreed with Al-Qaeda that the Americans are not to advance. Incensed, Sergeant Major Jim orders his men to get moving, but Zaman's fighters surround them, levelling their Kalashnikovs. Khan manages to ease the standoff, but Zaman insists that the team stays put. News of the ceasefire spreads rapidly. Jawbreaker commander, CIA officer Gary Bernstein, with bin Laden almost in his grasp, rages over the radio. No ceasefire, no negotiation, we continue airstrikes. The Americans are already wary of Zaman. He allegedly allowed Al-Qaeda fighters safe passage in earlier days fighting. Khan and Jim press him for information. Zaman tells the Americans that the ceasefire has been agreed until 5 PM to give Al-Qaeda time to come down from the mountains. However, it comes to light that he has been talking to the media about a new ceasefire until 8 AM on the 13th. The Americans will not tolerate this. Zaman leaves for the schoolhouse to meet with an equally unhappy George and Greer. 5 PM arrives. The mountain passes are empty. No one is surrendering. MSS Grinch grab their M4 rifles. Jim, with a stony gaze, warns the Afghan left in charge. Don't raise your weapons at us. In minutes, the American and British operators are back in the fight. Split in teams of 4, Grinch presses along rugged hillsides and over the valleys, calling J-dams on any resistance they meet. One team runs into a Dishka machine gun, smacking 50 caliber rounds into the sharp rocks scattered on the knife-edge ridge. Battling the early symptoms of altitude sickness, the men go to ground, as one of the SBS commandos calls in a 1,000-pound GBU-32 guided bomb from an orbiting fighter. As frustrating as the Eastern Alliance's ceasefire debacle has been, the Americans do have cause for celebration. The fact that Al-Qaeda is even negotiating means they're on the ropes. But it also means that bin Laden and other leaders may now try to flee. Delta Force lobbies CENTCOM to employ airdropped mines to block the mountain passes into Pakistan, but this is rejected. Another 8 SBS commandos and an MI6 field officer arrive to support Haji Zaman. Behind closed doors, the British officer makes it crystal clear to Zaman that there will be no repeat of his prior actions. Building on MSS Grinch's success, Major Greer forms MSS Monkey. It pushes up the western side of the mountains, relieving the Green Berets at Cobra Bravo. Greer is excited at the prospect of reinserting ODA 572 somewhere else, but they are immediately withdrawn. The signals analysts intercept bin Laden's voice on the radio again, but it's only a pre-recorded sermon. On the 14th of December, thick cloud and snow hinders American airstrikes, as the battle devolves into a brutal close-quarters slog, rooting out the fanatical Al-Qaeda remnants making their final stands in the dozens of caves and spider holes. Their deaths buy time. Taliban and Al-Qaeda leaders scramble up the snow-covered passes, under the sharp peaks of the Svingar Mountains, to safely enter Pakistan. The same passes Bernstein wanted covered by US Army Rangers, and also the same passes that Delta Force wanted to deny with airdropped mines. Bernstein estimates that at least 200 Al-Qaeda fighters escape into Pakistan. Task Force 11 scrambles to make up for lost time as the weather clears on the 15th. MSS Grinch is working with General Ali's men when they stop on a ridgeline. They refuse to advance until a Dishka machine gun position on the opposite ridge has been cleared. The gun hasn't fired for hours and has already been struck. But the Afghans are having none of it and sit down, some to smoke hash. 3 Delta Force snipers, Murph, Scrawny, and John Shrek McPhee, pick their way down the treacherous slope and flank around to the east. They reach an overwatch position, and Scrawny spots an Al-Qaeda fighter around 800 meters away, firing an RPG. He eases his SR-25 rifle onto the figure, but changes his mind. To avoid revealing their position, he and Shrek call in an orbiting US fighter, and a GPS-guided bomb eliminates the lone man. Pushing on, the team re-destroy the Dishka position with more airstrikes, prompting a limited advance by General Ali's fighters. Later that afternoon, a frantic Afghan commander reports a tall man, matching 6'6" bin Laden, with a large personal bodyguard entering a nearby cave. Listening in on the radios from their new vantage point, MSS Grinch realises they can see the cave network in question. Admiral wastes absolutely no time, taking a roll call of all available aircraft. From across Afghanistan and the Arabian Sea, dozens of aircraft are ready for tasking. US Air Force Strike Eagles from Kuwait, Navy Tomcats and Hornets flying from the carriers Kitty Hawk, Theodore Roosevelt and Carl Vinson, and more of the strategic bombers, both B-1B Lancers and B-52 Stratofortresses from Diego Garcia. Within minutes, the aircraft are stacked at 1,000-foot intervals, just waiting for the word. On the hilltop, the atmosphere is electric, as the first call of weapons away crackles over the net. MSS Grinch might be about to obliterate Osama bin Laden. Explosions rip across the landscape. The first 2,000-pound JDAMs smash their designated coordinates. Exposed fighting positions are wiped out in minutes. JDAMs fitted with bunker-busting BLU-109 warheads punch through the bedrock and detonate deep inside the tunnels as Grinch operators adjust their SOFLAMs onto more targets. Admiral fights to make himself heard over the constant ear-splitting cacophony of shockwaves ripping overhead. Laser-guided GBU-12 paveways fall from the wings of Navy fighters and plunge through 30,000 feet, steered into the mouths of caves. The explosive overpressure blasts through the depths, killing the occupants. For Al-Qaeda warriors, venturing outside means certain death. All they can do is burrow in terror as the firestorm of American bombs reverberates above them. Larger caverns are struck again and again, and crumbling stone blocks the entrances, entombing the insurgents. Multiple Lancers and B-52s empty their entire bomb load on the besieged peaks. Secondary explosions erupt from beneath the collapsing mountainside. A searing flash of light signals the detonation of stored ammunition. Fragments of burning ordnance cascade across the valley. Only after a full 2 hours of carnage does the onslaught end. The dust and smoke slowly sets with the sun. Flickers of orange flames glow against the darkening sky. Admiral has nothing left to hit. The Afghan fighters drift away as usual, while Grinch braces for another long freezing night on the mountain. By the 17th of December 2001, the fighting around Tora Bora has ended, the last weary Al-Qaeda fighters surrendering. No one in the US government is sure where bin Laden and his closest advisors are. Many hope that bin Laden lies dead under the rubble and simply hasn't been identified. Another Green Beret team is deployed to scour the mountainsides and identify bodies, but to no avail. Of particular attention is the site of the massive 15th of December airstrike, but no human remains matching bin Laden's DNA are found. In the wake of Tora Bora, administration figures backpedal. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld claims that no one knew for certain that bin Laden was there, even though US Central Command staff reports that he would phone at least once a day to ask, "Did you get him?" But bin Laden was there. According to journalist and counter-terrorism expert Peter Bergen, late at night on the 12th of December as the ceasefire silenced the battlefield, the Sheikh and 2 of his sons crept out of their bunker and slipped out of Tora Bora undetected. Keeping a low profile, unhindered by bodyguards, they then managed to travel 30 miles, not to Pakistan as expected, but incredibly north to the Afghan city of Jalalabad, behind coalition lines. He sheltered with an old friend, a warlord by the name of Awal Ghul. From there, bin Laden travels on horseback 100 miles to a remote location in Kunar province, where he would lay low for several weeks, protected by another old friend from the Soviet-Afghan War. On the 15th of April 2002, a tape proving Osama bin Laden is alive and well is aired on Arabic news network Al Jazeera. The failure of Tora Bora sparks a manhunt that will last a decade.